Dear students, today we are going to discuss about still some more concept about transaction and system concepts. So transaction already we have seen. A transaction is an atomic unit of work that is either completed in entirety or not at all. Completely it should be performed or nothing to be performed over there. There are several transaction states that we are going to see now. Each transaction may be in any one of the following states. It may be in active state, or it may be in partially committed state, or committed state, or failed, or terminated state. So once transaction started, it is a begin transaction, then it is going to be in a reactive state when it's reading or writing the value. Then once the transaction is completed, it will enter in that is end transaction. It will be partially committed, that will be stored in the buffer. Then permanent commit it will be given, means it will be stored in a database and it will be terminated. So this is one cycle. Begin transaction, read write value, that is in active state, then partially committed, terminated. Otherwise, during that read write operation itself, some transaction failure may be occur, then it will enter into failed state, then it will be terminated. Then after that partial commit, before saving into the main database, due to some reason it may be failed, so the transaction may be aborted, then it will enter into terminated state. So here once the transaction is failed, and means that in future that will be automatically restarted, or that will be again automatically restarted, or we have to initiate the transaction process again. So these are the things. Then next we need DBMS recovery manager needs system to keep track of the following operations. So the DBMS recovery manager, because during the transaction processing, if any failure occurs, the recovery manager is responsible to recover the data. So for that purpose, DBMS recovery manager maintains log file. So the log file contains the following informations: begin transaction, when the start of the transaction execution, when it is started, and what are the read and write operations to be performed, and when it is end, that is end transaction. So that everything will be stored into the log file. And then recovery manager keeps track of the following operations: what are the commit transactions happened, successfully committed, then what are the operations aborted, that anything it is rolled back. So every information should be stored in the log file by the recovery manager. And then system operations used during recovery is, so during recovery process, what are the system operations used means undo operation as well as redo operation. Undo of X means this is similar to rollback operation, except that it applies to a single write operation rather than to a whole transaction. Undo means the whole transaction, that is it will be applied. Redo is specifies that a write operation of a committed transaction must be redone to ensure that it has been applied permanently to the database on disk. Okay, so redo means only it is applicable for write operation, that should be done, then permanently the database will be stored, the changes will be stored in the database. Okay, so these are all the two system operations used during recovery process. And then the system log file, we know this here main thing is only it is an append only file, because no deletion and nothing. So only that keep track of all operations of all transactions in the order in which they occurred. In the same order it will be appended into the log file. Okay, this information when it is needed during recovery when the failure occurs. Okay, so log is kept on disk, not affected except the disk or catastrophic failure. Catastrophic failure already you know that we can't rectify that failure, disk damage, anything. So except only the log file is kept in the disk, so only it will affect by catastrophic failure. Okay, so as with other disk files, log main memory buffer is kept for holding records being appended until the whole buffer is appended at the end of the log file. That is the default it will happen. So the log is periodically backed up by the RTH, so that is tape, is in tape where periodically backup storage will be stored to guard against the catastrophic failure. If any catastrophic failure occurs, we can't recover the data. So to avoid that, that is frequent backups should be stored into the tape. So the transaction, the system, in the transaction system concept, the types of log records in log file are that contains T is a unique transaction ID generated for each transaction. So along with that, what are the information will be stored means start transaction with the ID T, write item T, X, old value, comma, new value. Write item is an operation, T is the transaction name, X is the value of an item that will be changed from old value to new value. Read item T, comma, X means the transaction T performs the read operation, reads the item value X. End transaction T means T has ended the transaction. Then commit T means T has completed successfully and committed. The database, the changes will be stored permanently in the database. Abort T means T has been aborted. Okay, the system log file, it will be there. So it is use protocols for recovery that avoid cascading rollbacks, do not require that read operations be written in the system log. That is the thing, same thing. So the strict protocols require simple write entries that only include new values or old value instead of including both. Only one value only it is going to maintain, strict protocols. So the commit point of a transaction means a transaction T reaches its commit point when all its operations that access the database has been executed successfully, and the effect of all transactions should be saved into the database, recorded into log file, as well as it will be saved into the database. Okay, the commit point, that is that what are the things should be maintained by commit point of a transaction is log file buffer, log file, then force writing the log buffer. That means first it will be that all changes should be stored in the log buffer, then it will be written into the main database once the operation is completely performed, then called force writing the log buffers before committing the transaction. Okay, so that's all about transaction concepts. So here you should know, so what are the different states of transaction is used, and then what is meant by system log and commit point, and how that log file is maintained, what are the data will be stored in the log file, and so on. Thank you.